Welcome one all, my name is Tawess and today we are painting an executioner. And I got this right this time. This was the fourth time I started it, and other times I called it an assassin. It's not an assassin, it's an executioner. And while I applied the regular step of slathering the entire thing in Black Templar black contrast paint, and I know some of you people wonder why in the name of did you paint it white first then? And to be quite honest, it was batch painted with a lot of other things. So I like just line them up on a big cardboard box and hose them down with, I think it is Wraithbone. Because, or more correctly, yeah, actually it's Wraithbone. It's not the army painter equivalent. It's actually Wraithbone. Anyway, yeah. I knew I was gonna paint it black, and I was like, why not? And contrast paints works better with white than grey or black. It doesn't work with black at all, actually. Or it does, but not particularly well. Anyway, today we are doing something a bit special for me, because I was thinking, I'm gonna have some fun today. And part of the fun was like, what am I gonna paint? And then I was like, I'm gonna paint another mech for my shield wall unit. Shield wall lance, because for those unfamiliar with it, the shield wall, Schaldborg, God, I can't actually pronounce that in English. Sköldborg is a mech warrior online unit I was in many years ago. Based out of Rasselhaug. I never understood why they have a slightly German sounding when they're supposed to be Scandinavian. I don't know. It's a Hansa thing. I don't know. Anyway, this unit was created by Dim before the game launched, and unfortunately we kind of had our peak before the game launched, and then when the game launched, we got gobbled up by the units. But no, it is what it is. It was a fun unit. Been years since I played it last time. The base common spec is grey, with green and blue accenting lines and a nice pauldron. So we're going to do that. Now, I did my basic blocking in the grey, because blocking in grey is nice, and then went on to edge highlighting, because it is what it is. You've seen me done this many a time. I'm going to put out a dedicated video at some point with just going over blocking in and doing edge highlighting. But today is not that day. There might be extra time skip here somewhere, because I think I actually moved some clips around. I don't know. Professionalism at its core. But basically, blocking in, you put down a solid block of color, try to avoid painting into the crevices and nooks and crannies, maintaining the deep shadow and recesses, and then you just go over them with a much lighter color, picking out the edges and picking out sharp points. This time, I made sure to avoid painting edge highlights on the underside. Right, so here we come to the pauldron, and the pauldron for the company I was in is inspired by a typical design you see on Varangian guard shields. It's a yellow and orange. Oh, I forgot the name of it. At one point I knew heraldry, but anyway, it's quartered in orange and yellow. I was like, let's do that. And of course, this effect translated very well to this map, because its pauldron is already split crosswise, meaning that I did not have to paint two straight lines. I just had to paint a vertical line, not a horizontal line. And yeah, this was always lucky that I didn't paint the grey, because I would have painted the arm white before doing this, because orange and yellow do not, and I repeat, they do not like grey or black or, well, any color but white. You can get some very fun effects if you put colors under yellow and orange, but generally speaking, if you want pure orange or pure yellow, white is your best bet. But yeah, the shield wall in a way still exists, I think. I don't know. I haven't checked into mech warrior online in years. Not properly, at least. But yeah, a nice solid orange and a nice solid yellow. You have to apply a few coats to get there. But in the end, keep them light, keep them thin. That is, as noted before, that is the way to keep anything. Keep your coats light and thin. And you will have a lot easier time doing things. Now, if you can see, I also painted a cockpit, and it's pretty easy. That was a simple 3-step procedure doing base white. I put in some dark ink, let that dry, went over that with a bright white, put on a layer of slightly warmer green ink, and then top that off with a quick flick of a regular green color. That made sure that has a nice tonal shift. It's a nice gradient in there without having to do an actual gradient in there, because that area is a millimeter. And I say hats off to anyone who can paint a proper gradient on a surface that is about, okay, it's probably about 2 millimeters. 3 millimeters perhaps. 2 millimeters. I said 2 millimeters. Sounds proper. If you can do that, you are the boss. I do not have that skill. So I tend to cheat a bit. And contrast paints and inks are perfect for that sort of thing. Same with the main body. If you are having a hard time imagining where you're going to put your highlights, putting down a base layer of a contrast paint is a great way to do that, even if you do not intend to actually use that base layer for a base layer. You can paint over the entire thing, but it will give you an idea of where the highlights and where the shadow sits. So that's a great tool, a great way to use it. But, I mean, beyond that, there's not much else to do, is there? Now, I think we're at the stage where we're going to try and paint down the lines, and this also is surprisingly slow process. Yep. This part is getting cut out, by the way. Doesn't really matter what I say here, because this part is getting cut out, because I completely messed this one up. I should really ask for a sponsor from Chromlech, because I have the logo very prominently on that thing. So yeah, the mech now sits at a fairly ready state, and I start off with a dark blue. We're gonna highlight that up with a bright blue later, but we start off with a fairly dark blue and a very loaded brush, because that's a trick when doing pinstriping and line work. And anyway, a loaded brush with a fine tip. But of course, as always, you have to try to not overload the brush, because if you overload the brush, you get sloppy. But a loaded brush needs to be moist. Very moist. Not damp, and definitely not soggy, but moist. Because that will allow the paint just slide off it. I mean, but it's life without paint sliding off. I don't know. Do you know? Do anyone know? No, nobody knows. Nobody knows what life is without paint sliding off. But yeah, now I'm not being perfectly identical to how we planned this, or how Dim planned this to look from the beginning, but on the other hand, we never actually could apply it the way he intended it anyway, because Mech Warrior I didn't allow for that. Slight miscalculation on our part. But, for all intents and purposes, it's still a nice color scheme. The idea is that the blue line and the green line, which will be applied in a bit, represent the sky and the ground. And of course the pauldron is the unit markings. We had 3 of them. That one, which was the Huskarls. We had the Dragon Hunters, I think it was... Oh god, I can't remember anymore. Anyway, they had a red, black, and dark red shield. And then we had the... Oh, I actually have to look up what the name was. I completely forgot. I have to look this up, actually. the pig boys. The swine array. They have a white, blue background with white stripes. We're gonna see that later. No, we're gonna do the green now, and I then almost painted all of the blue. Then I was realized I needed a brighter blue, because the dark blue when dried was. And that was an aircraft. If you heard it, we are living fairly close to a airfield, and well, airplanes happens. But yeah, so those were three divisions within the Merc unit, and that was basically the heraldry they were supposed to be using. We never got there, but it was still a good idea. I mean, if you're gonna play a game like MechWarrior, I think playing with the unit is the way to do it, because pickup groups, as fun as they are messy and horrible and slightly depressing. And having a unit is good. Of course, you have to be a fairly good unit, because once you get grouped up and queue as a group, you're gonna get put in with other groups. You know? Now, of course, when you're playing the board game, that doesn't matter. That's you and you are the god. You make all the choices. But yeah, we go over this with some lighter blue, bring it the color up a bit. Now we're currently in a bit of a holding pattern, because I had an idea for starting this buildings series, and then I ran out of resin, and we have to wait until the paycheck comes in to get more resin. And but the idea is that once the resin gets back in, we start printing again. We're gonna punch out some terrain, because in a long line of things, things I'm not going to be making by hand is furniture for 6mm scale. We're not going to have that much fun. No. And I have considered also making terrain for the battle mat scale. But that scale is literally all over the place. Because each one of those squares are it's like 30 meters, which is twice the size of a mech laying down. I mean, a sugar cube is a mall in that size. So we're not gonna do that. We're gonna leave that to be. Now, painting the unit insignia is another one of these things, because it consists of a sphere cut in half with a blue and a green field, and 3 small shields positioned around it. And when you paint at this scale, you have to be brave. And I wasn't really brave enough here, but you have to be brave. You can't hesitate. You have to load your brush up, and you have to go for it. Because if you start doubting and being careful, things like a half circle is going to start looking a lot more like, well, a booger before you're done with it. So just be brave. Take a deep breath and be brave. And when you go in and paint the shield, if you're going to paint some of the shields I'm painting on later, you need to be braver. And I definitely chickened out at that point. You're going to see that later, but painting these small things, you have to be brave. If you have water slide decals, if you have water slide transfers, use them. Because hand painting at this fine with a brush is difficult. And it's okay if you don't like doing it. But yeah, we've now finished the earth and sky portion of the logo. And since we're going to do yellow, I'm trying to build up a good yellow off screen by mixing 2 different. I think it's got yellows. No, we actually got the blue first. Yeah, mix up some blue, some brighter blue first to get more punch into the blue. Punchy blue. Because even brighten up was still a bit too dark. And then we're going to go in with yellow. But yeah. It's an interesting little thing, isn't it? I had a bit too dry of a brush when I did that. The brush wasn't loaded enough, so it started to smear the paint around. Ideally, you just want to go in and put in one solid dot, because that would naturally create sort of circular shape, and you can paint on top of that later, but still, it's a thing. Now, I went with yellow first, of course, because painting yellow over orange when it's that scale is not going to be fun. So I wanted to make it as easy for me as I could, so I just decided to take the yellow first. And it's not even painting as much as stippling on the paint at this point. Because trying to paint, let's say, it's a very delicate motion, and the paint isn't necessarily agreeing with you. And beyond that, as I said, just load the brush up, as much paint as you can there, and just dot it on. Because that is the easiest way to do it. Now, if you have an airbrush, of course, you can just mask things a bit, and then you spray through a stencil, which also makes life a lot easier. Stencil spraying makes things easier. But when you're down to this scale, which is almost pinhead size, I think it's easier to just get a pinhead and dot the colors in. But yeah, this is selling the general idea, at least if the details aren't there. It's selling the general idea of the heraldry, which is pretty much what we're going for. Yeah, you can see, carefully trying to make little circles, and this in this case did not work at all. It is not a circle over there. It's a blob. It's a slightly octagonal blob. But you know, we learn, we get better. And I was not going to start over just for that. It's like, nope, we take this what it is and we run with it. Now we're going with the bit more yellow to just brighten the yellow up a bit, solidifying it a bit more, because yellow likes at least 2-3 coats, as we mentioned before. You kind of need 2-3 coats, because otherwise yellows get angry, and you don't want your yellow angry. Angry yellow is bad. Did I actually forget to paint that part of the backside of the shoulder? I might have done that. We'll have to look that up later. That's a later issue. And now I'm going to stripe the stripes in on that shield later on. It's still not good, but we're trying to solidify the English. English just took a vacation. It went to Bahamas. It will be coming back in 2 weeks. Until then, we will be speaking Swedish. Hej och välkomna allihopa. Tack så mycket ni lyssnar här nu. Okay, just kidding. But yeah, sometimes my English just decides to leave. It's a thing that happens. So yeah, now we're trying to go in and carefully build up the orange. And again, be brave. Be daring almost with your handling of this, because if you start doubting yourself, you're soon going to paint the entire thing orange, and you do not want that, because then you have to start all over again. So yes, be brave. Can't say it turned out overly good, but yeah. Also, I don't know if we've got new camera setup. I'm getting used to it. It's getting better. We're getting a decent quality of it. It's definitely better than before. But it's still a bit, I don't know. It's a bit, That is what it is for now. Now I'm going to try and do the stripes on the shield, because that is fun. Again, the brush was a bit too dry and didn't flow properly, because the white paint had started to dry out. Even if I was using a wet palette, it was still starting to dry out a bit. So, yeah, it wasn't agreeing with me. And then we just applied some black on on the red and black Dragon Hunter shield where it's supposed to be. So yeah. I know it doesn't look like much, but it's at least something. And it's better than nothing. And that is a thing we should appreciate more often. Things doesn't necessarily have to be good, but it's at least better. Yeah, this is a bit of touch up, because I realized there should be a swirl to it, and there was no swirl to it, so I had a little bit of swirl to it. Again, this is good for having orange and yellow like that, because it adds a little flourish to the shield. Because they're like blades, fan blades normally. Yeah. That is pretty much it for the mech. You can paint, the arm is currently still white, and we are going to do something about that, because I want it to be like armored, in quotation marks, armored. So I decided to paint it silver, and I got the bright silver first, and that was a bit too bright, but I haven't already committed, so whatever, we make it work. It's a very bright silver, and a bright silver or a white looks very, very bright, but it also loses a bit of definition. So the solution to this, well, we hit a bit more contrast paint, and then I'm gonna apply a bit of gunmetal silver on top of that, just brushing it on to give it a very interesting silvery metal-y look, because this looks like pewter almost bright. It doesn't look like metal at all. It looks like silver plastic, and we didn't want that. That was not what we wanted. But while we're at it, we also paint the weapons, and as I mentioned before, my deal is that I paint all my weapons silver to some degree to make it easy to spot where they are, because, well, I think the lasers technically don't need to be silver. Gun barrels and such as need to be metal at least, and putting paint on them will sooner or later burn the paint off, so also, I assume that the thing he has on his head is silver, is a weapon. I'm not entirely sure. It might just be a very fancy mohawk, but I assume it's some sort of weapon. So he painted it as a weapon, and I think the little thing on the shoulder is also a weapon. I wasn't really sure, but we assume that it's a weapon. It looks like weapons, so you're gonna paint it silver anyway, because it works. But as you can see, this arm is like aluminum bright, and we don't want it to be aluminum bright. We want it to be slightly bright. We also paint the exhaust ports on the back. I think those are exhaust ports. Again, sometimes you can't really tell. I mean, sometimes it's fun to have like the designer commentator track to these things. Be like, I could see if I can get a hold of Bishop, talk to Bishop Steiner about the designs that they made, but I'm not entirely sure if they would consider going on a small channel like this. But yeah, here it is in all its glory. The finished Executioner, minus the forgotten shoulder. So yeah, until next time, stay safe, be kind, and do play fair. Bye.